than to see a 17-year-old young man or young lady in front of us with their whole life in front of them. And so we want to do more than just funerals. We want to do more than just praying. And so we want to bring our collective resource to the city so that the city can see us. And we have been, again, doing this for many, many years without one dime or acknowledgement of reducing the violence that we have in our communities.
I'm Brooklyn DA Eric Gonzalez, and today we came together with the members of our community and our clergy. The Precinct Council clergy has grown in parts of Brooklyn, but we've never been connected in ways that have put us all together doing the work. So today we announced a new initiative. That initiative is going to have all the clergy council working to do violence interruptions in our communities, partnering with our office, making sure that we can keep our families safe in Brooklyn, and making sure that our clergy has the resources that they need in order to do some of the work. We know that the clergy has always been there for our community. The churches have been part of our communities from day one when we're born, and we get baptized to the day we pass and we're buried. Our clergy is so important in our lives, and giving our clergy the opportunity, the chance to work with the district attorney's office and law enforcement to keep their congregations and their communities safe is a new initiative that we're building right here in Brooklyn, and one that I think will spread throughout the city.
Today I am honored to be here, and I want to commend the district attorney for his leadership and his vision to work with the clergy. And also I want to thank Pastor Gil Monrose and the GodSquad also, and all the other clergy who are really pushing out there in the community also. And as many of us has been out there in the street for many years, and we have been heard but not been fully acknowledged to getting the resources that we needed. And it's a great thing to see that this is really coming to pass. So right here at Restoration Plaza, and it's not only just the violence against the the people in the community, but there's a violence against the church also, where churches and religious institution has been also under attack. Like even my church was set on fire, and here we go again. They break in again and snatch the generator from our mobile church, and there are more have been happening every day. So we need to step up and get some of the resources.
All right, thank you all for joining us, and good morning. That was just a great, just a piece of what we have been doing and working in our communities, and welcome all. My name is Pastor Gil Monrose, and I am the president and the convener of the GodSquad and also Clergy For Safe Cities. Clergy For Safe Cities started about 1.5 years ago when we decided to pull clergy from all across America, territories, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Caribbean to really look at the issue of gun violence and find ways for clergy to support one another, to provide the technical assistance that is needed so that, again, the violence in our community can decrease. And so we are faced with multiple levels of issues within our community since COVID-19. And we continue to, again, to make sure that we do the work and to be able to bring our collective resources to the table. So again, we are so grateful and we're happy again to have all of you with us today and joining us. Today, we would like to begin with a prayer from Bishop Hugh Nelson. Bishop Hugh Nelson is pastoring in East Flatbush, and he is the second vice president for the 67th Precinct Clergy Council. Bishop Nelson, we welcome you to the National Summit.
Thank you, Pastor Monrose. Surely a pleasure to meet with all of you. I believe that gun violence is the concern of all of us as members of the community, and I'm grateful at least for the acknowledgement that the clergy is now receiving, because we do play a part as well. Just want to do a biblical reference in terms of the word of the Lord, Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 7. And it speaks, and seek the peace of the city, whether I've caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof shall you have peace. And we believe that the welfare and the safety of our community cannot be resolved only by the police. It takes a partnership between the cops, community, and the churches. And so I'm grateful that at least there's an acknowledgement as to the work that we have been doing over the years. Grateful for the leadership of Pastor Gil Monrose and the other clergy. And I'm so thankful that you've taken the time to join us in this pivotal moment as we address this important topic. Would you bow your heads with me? Father, we bow our hearts before you today, grateful for your mercies. We're thankful, Lord, that you have brought us together across boundaries, across states, and even outside of the U.S. around this vital topic of gun violence. Your words are true. The enemy comes but to kill, steal, and destroy. Yet you said, I am come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. We believe it is your desire, it is your will that we have abundance and that we prosper. And I pray that even as we have convened this occasion, we ask for your wisdom, your insight, thankful for the various agencies represented. And I pray that God, as we have come together in this forum, that you give us the grace, the insight, and the wisdom, that out of this context will come solutions and ideas and programs that together we can stem the tide of gun violence, not only in our city, but in our country. And so we pray for your grace and mercies, and thank you for your continued grace, your mercies and provision. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Pastor Bill.
Amen. Thank you so much, Bishop, for those words. And remember the prophet Jeremiah. We are standing on the wall right now as a community. As we look across the country, we know for sure that gun violence is up in every single major city that we have. We have our Clergy For Safe Cities, who today will be signing our first linkage agreement with Dallas-Fort Worth. We have Orlando, Florida. We have Chicago with Pastor Corey Brooks, and also Indiana with Pastor Harrison. And in all of these cities, we see that the violence is up. It's not just about bail reform, because most of these cities have no bail reform, and the violence is still skyrocketing in our cities. We know for sure that police, again, is not the only answer to solving these issues. The churches have been, and faith leaders have been at the forefront of providing moral support, moral guidance, youth ministries over the years, and again, have been an equal partner in reducing violence in our communities. This summit, again, brings together all of the best practices of faith communities across this country and bring it into one umbrella. We're not supporting one over the other. We're saying that these are all that's working. And also, too, for elected officials and for faith leaders, those who work in violence interruptions organization, to see that clergy can play a very significant part and has been playing a very significant part in the violence, reducing the violence in our communities. So we're very glad from the state of New York to have, this is her second time around. She loved it so much the first time that she's back the second time, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul from the great state of New York. Lieutenant Governor, welcome again to the National Summit on Clergy Prevention.
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Monrose. It's sad that we have to be doing this. To me, it's a tragedy. I'm going to get yellow so I can see everybody here. It's sad that we have to do this, but I'm so proud of the work that you have done, and the GodSquad and all of our partners and the clergy. Just even have the Clergy Safe Cities Gun Violence Initiative. It's extraordinary. And to me, it's a response to all of you who see human beings at their most vulnerable in their times of the greatest pain. And I said this when we spoke before, that many times when there is an act of violence, the clergy are the ones who are literally triaging. I mean, we have the first responders who, stop the bleeding, stop the hemorrhaging, get someone off to a hospital. You have the law enforcement that's on the scene to try and find out the perpetrators, what happened there. But it's the clergy that are in it for the long haul. They're the ones that are consoling the families in the hospital. They're the ones that are hugging people, grieving and crying over the loss of a child. They're the ones who sometimes have to put together a funeral service for a young person. And to think that June is Gun Violence Awareness Month, I don't accept that premise, because if you live in Black and brown communities, it is not 1 month that you're aware of this. You're aware of this every single day. And all of us should be sick and tired of what is happening to our children. And to see the news that we lost a 10-year-old just yesterday in Queens, visiting his uncle, a young man, Justin Wallace, who had a great promising future. And he was another victim of this senseless crime of violence. And to know that the numbers in our state at one time were declining, and now murders in the state of New York are up 45%. Yes, a lot of it was from the stress of COVID. People were captured. They were in volatile situations, in situations where they were not able to get the support they needed, not able to go to jobs, not able to get counseling they needed, not able to get substance abuse they needed. It was a horrific year and it took its toll. But now as we're emerging from that pandemic, we have to accept the fact that we have another pandemic going on right here in our own state and in our own nation. And to have all of you partners coming together to give us in government your ideas on what we need to be doing is so enormously helpful. We have people who understand what the possibilities are. We have someone like our great Attorney General, Letitia James, who's been on the forefront of this battle since the beginning of her career. In our state, we have the toughest gun laws in the nation. We have had background checks. We have a ban on assault weapons. We have protections for young people in schools and domestic abusers and out-of-state gun loopholes. We have the whole list of what you need, but the guns are still finding their way to our streets. And that's where it has to stop. We need a national awakening. And I pray, as a former member of Congress, that we can find the courage in Washington to do what should have been done years ago. If we didn't take action after Sandy Hook, when the whole nation was talking about those babies gunned down in their classroom as first graders and could not even come up with a background check, we're not talking about taking away people's, we're just saying, let us know who you are so we can track it down. But we've come a long way since then. We have seen more lives devastated. Black children are 10 times more likely to be shot than white children. This is disgraceful. And in 2021, that we can't solve this problem at this time, I think we're up to the challenge. I think we can do this. I believe that we can send a message across the nation that no more are we going to be having to have these conferences to grieve and talk about what needs to be done, and we'll say we accomplished it. How does that happen? We have to give people hope. We have to capture these young people when they're young, let them know that we believe in them. And the clergy plays such an important role in this, in giving them the faith. You understand that God loves each and every one of them, that they have value, that other people have value as well. These are the teachings of Jesus Christ as I was taught them, and I live by them. And too many people are not hearing this message. And I'm sitting in a lot of churches in the city and all over the state. Too often it's the grandmas and the moms that are sitting there. And I'm saying, where are the young people who need to hear this message? That's what we have to do, is have a concerted effort to get them to hear the word of God, to hear the clergy who can help lift up their spirits and give them hope. But on the government side, we have to continue helping people who have been incarcerated, give them new jobs, make sure they don't have a mark on them for the rest of their lives. Job retraining, let people in high school know how important it is to finish their degree, get into a program, whether it's college, whether it's an apprenticeship program. There are opportunities for them. Every single person has value. Their lives have meaning, and we in government have to live like that and not just pay tribute once a month to gun violence awareness. This has to be our calling every single day, 24 hours a day. I don't want to see any more of these horrific stories that break our hearts as a collective community. We have to stop it. And it starts with events like this. When you are done with this, when you come up with your ideas, when you talk about what's going on in other states, even as far as the territories, the Virgin Islands, tell us in government what those ideas are. Continue to be partners. If there's something we have not thought of, something we've not done that you think should happen to help us collectively solve this, you have my ear. I will listen to you. I'll make sure that the people at the highest level understand we need to have these changes. So I just say from the bottom of my heart, God bless every one of you for not turning your backs on people in their greatest time of need. And I am optimistic, just as we beat back this pandemic, that we can prevail over this pandemic of gun violence working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. And for sure, we're going to take you up on that. We have definitely great plans and great ideas in terms of the funding stream that President Biden so graciously put in his the American Relief Plan so that the resources can be in New York State. And I trust and pray that, again, that we will definitely get together with our team so that we can see how we can move this agenda forward. So thank you again, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Lieutenant Governor from the state of New York, Kathy Hochul, again, thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to introduce the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands, the only Black elected governor in the U.S., Governor Albert Bryan, who is joining us from the Virgin Islands at this point in time. So, Governor, good to see you, and thank you again for coming on to our national summit on clergy to prevent gun violence. And thank you again, sir.
Pleasure to see you, Gil, and warm hellos to everybody on the line. That was such an impassioned plea by the Lieutenant Governor, and she said so many of the things that I want to echo today. First, I would like to thank Pastor Monrose and the GodSquad for all the beautiful work that they've been doing in the Virgin Islands. We finally got through a piece of legislation that will allow us to start to do the things that will control gun violence in our community. Now, who would think that in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, truly emerald jewels are the Virgin Islands of 110,000 people, that we would have a gun violence problem? We don't have a single gun store in the Virgin Islands. There certainly are a couple of gun ranges, but there's nowhere you can go and pick up a gun and buy it. And yet we still have a proliferation of firearms in our territory. And, you think about all the things that go on from places which are dominated by Black and brown people, and the massive amount of gun violence that we've seen is now leaking out into the general community. Watching the news over the weekend, I was, as usual, disturbed by what is happening. This is a small community, and every time someone gets shot or someone dies, I'm the one that has to reach out and talk to a mother, a father, a loved one about what has happened. Since coronavirus, we've had more people die from gunshot wounds than from the actual virus. To date, we have only had 28 people die from coronavirus in the Virgin Islands. And I thought to myself, well, why is that? Why is it that this community has done so well? We're almost fully open, 4,000 people coming in every day. We have 5 people on the island of St. Croix with active virus in there, and 100 in St. Thomas, but it's trending down. We said, why is it that we were able to do so well? Well, the reason why is because the entire community came together to fight one common enemy, coronavirus. It decided that we were not going to allow it to penetrate our shores and infiltrate our people. The community decided that it was going to police itself and tell people, you don't wear your mask, you don't get service. If you don't comply with the rules, then you have to leave. The community decided that. When I think about the work that we're doing with the GodSquad, that is the piece that we're always missing. And sometimes I think it's our last hope to really control gun violence anywhere. I was talking to an ex-felon the other day who was doing some work for us. And he said, these people get in trouble because they make bad choices. They have bad choices because they have bad perspectives. And they have bad perspective because they have bad values. And if we change their values, you will change their perspective, which will open up more choices and options to make the right ones. That's what we believe this program can do for us. To start to switch people back to understand the value for human life. That credit and moral strength doesn't only come from carrying a gun in your waist, but from providing from your family, for doing for your community, and for doing for others. But there are people out there who are thirsty in the abundance of water because they don't understand the plethora of options the government has to understand. We are working to organize our community in a way that speaks to people before the violence happens, to be the interrupters in trying to get us back to where we need to be. At the end of the day, we all know one another. It's a very small town. And if we can't get it together and do it, nobody can. But we continue to do the things that we can and put the resources where they need to be. As we struggle to find a place where at night I wouldn't be shocked listening to the amount of gunfire, no matter what island I am on, and every morning listening to the shot spotter and how many shots were fired. We truly want to be Virgin Islands, an island paradise. And with the help of the GodSquad and your continued prayers, we will get there. Thank you again for inviting me. I look forward to much success with you, Pastor Monroe.
Thank you so much, Governor Bryan, and we thank you again for your leadership in the Virgin Islands. Just so everyone knows that what the governor was talking about, he again, with the help from New York City crisis management system, the Virgin Islands and the Senator Jackson, who led this bill, created an office to prevent gun violence, to triage and to bring all of the resources under one umbrella. This is happening in every major city in America. Reverend Charles Harrison, I'm not sure if he's on, but he will tell you that he has been saying to the mayor of Indianapolis, to pull together, including faith leaders, to help with reducing the violence. Violence, to reduce it, must take a multi-pronged effort. It's not one method. It is just not one organization. It's multiple levels of different things that we're talking about. So thank you again, Governor Bryan, for sharing that with us. And I have, again, the distinct pleasure of introducing the Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James, who's with us today. Good to see you, Attorney General. How are you?
It's great to see you. Thank you, Pastor. First, allow me to give honor to God this morning and this afternoon. And I thank all of the men and women of faith who are on this call. I want to give a shout out to my colleague in government, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. Thank her for her courageous effort in passing gun reform when she served in Congress. I want to thank her for all that she is doing. I want to give my thoughts and my prayers to the family of Justin Wallace, the 10-year-old young man from Rockaway, Queens, who unfortunately died as a result of senseless gun violence, a cowardly act by someone who suffers from a major disease, who recognizes that he had no other options and unfortunately had no respect for human life. And now a family has to bury a 10-year-old boy who wanted to be someone who wanted to focus on mathematics and who could have been a scientist or an architect. And unfortunately, now a family has to bury a child. My thoughts and prayers go out to those in Chicago. 55 people shot over the weekend. 55 in Chicago, Illinois, over this weekend. We certainly have a problem. And this is going to be a long, hot summer, not only in New York, but in every urban center across this nation, and even in the Caribbean. And that's why it's really critically important that individuals understand that public safety works best when a combination of individuals get together: law enforcement, clergy, elected officials, community leaders, activists. Countless number of individuals get together and recognize that this is a threat to our safety and to our humanity. And the problem really lies in our hands, that no one is coming in to save us. We've got to save ourselves. And it's important that, again, law enforcement be a part of this. I want to thank Pastor Monroe, and I want to thank my GodSquad. I've been working with my GodSquad ever since I was a member of the city council almost 15 years ago. And Reverend Monroe understands, as a founding member of the Clergy For Safe Cities, which spans many of the major cities that are on this call today. They know the value of this type of relationship, because gun violence, my friends, has strengthened its grip on our young people and in our community. And what we've got to do is address gun violence and release that grip. And over this past year, as has been mentioned, communities across this state have experienced high record levels of gun violence. And as was mentioned by the governor, most of these gun manufacturers are not in our backyard. They're not in urban centers all throughout our country. And it's unfortunate that, as the Attorney General of the state of New York, that I and other attorney generals in this nation do not have the tools to go after gun manufacturers and gun distributors, that there is a federal law which prohibits us from taking any legal action against these individuals because they have hijacked the federal government. And this gun lobby, unfortunately, has a lot of power in Washington, D.C. And what we need to do is repeal this law, which provides immunity to gun manufacturers and gun distributors. If you get injured by a product, you could basically sue that product manufacturer. Unfortunately, as the Attorney General, I am prohibited to taking any action against any gun manufacturer or gun distributor in this nation. Why? Because Congress unfortunately, has provided them safeguards. And we all know that the guns collected here in New York, 90% of the guns that we seize in New York are from the states in all along I-95, states with lax gun laws. And it's unfortunate. Actually, it's more than just unfortunate. It's outrageous that I cannot take any action against any of them because of these laws. In Rochester and Buffalo and Albany, gun violence has stolen so many lives, so many of our sons and daughters. I've attended too many funerals to count. I've held too many mothers and fathers over open caskets. There's something unnatural about a mother or a father burying their child. In 2020, almost a quarter of all violent crimes in New York State involved a firearm, and that doesn't even include New York City. And the percentage goes up to more than half for murders in the entire state. And so what we've got to do, if we are going to build back a better community from this epidemic of discrimination and hate, we must work together. We don't stand a chance if we work alone. And it's important that my office has been doing its part to fight back. Most recently in Rochester, we were able to recover 270 guns in a gun buyback. 270 in one gun buyback. And I want to thank the residents of Rochester. This past weekend, we did it in Kingston. We were able to recover a number of guns as well. And what we do and what we all need to do is to replace a gun, not just with some money, but with some technology, with a job, with an apartment, with some mental health services. We've got to replace those guns with something. And then we've got to focus on the federal government and urge them to pass responsible gun laws and to repeal the law in Washington, which provides protection and coverage for gun manufacturers and gun distributors. Taking guns off our street is only one method of controlling this form of violence. It's important, again, that we use technology, that we use data. We have hopefully a new ATF chairperson. We can work with that agency to provide the data which is absolutely necessary to keep these guns off of our streets. I want to thank the men and women of God who are on this call today. I want to thank all of the elected officials who are on this call today. But the only way that we're going to address this is by working together with data and with the power of the law, and also by instilling hope and jobs and apartments and housing and mental health services and any other services from community that unfortunately have not been invested in. We've got to invest in communities that historically have been ignored. And people need to know that there are individuals like you and me who care and who recognize that there is a higher power. I thank all of you. And with the right people and the right tools, we can make this world a better place and a place where all God's children can thrive. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. And you speak with the passion that we long to see in this. This is not just political for you. This is personal. And I've known you for, like you said, many years since in City Council, and you always have been constant. And I think that, again, you are in the right position for us as clergy leaders. We have clergy from across the country. I see Bishop McCoy from Orlando, Florida. Just last weekend in Miami-Dade, we had the mass shooting of 20 individuals. And so what we need is that we need that hand up. We need those resources that you talk about. The church have been that place that you're speaking from, that you are from, being part of the church structure, that we know that we give people hope, we give them opportunities, but we do need the resources to continue to do that work. And I want to thank you so much for placing the burden not only on us, but for the whole community in the whole. So I thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us in that way, personal, passionate. And I tell you, let us know also, we want to push Congress to make a difference because we just can't, again, have the violence overtake our communities. And so as you move forward and as you push forward your agenda with gun violence, let us know. Again, Clergy for Safe Cities, we are 200 strong. And we are in many cities across the country. We will support you as our Attorney General in New York State to lead the way across this country. And thank you again so much.
Bless you.
Bless you as well. So thank you again, Attorney General. Thank you so much, Governor Bryant. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. Thank you again, Bishop Nelson, for opening us up with the word of Jeremiah. And now we'll have John Mckenna, who is in Dutchess County in the state of New York. He is the director for Dutchess County Interfaith Council, and he is going to be speaking to us. Local, regional, national, all must work together. Let's welcome John Mckenna. John? Unmute yourself, John, I think. Let's see.
Now I'm here.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pastor Gill. It's an honor to be here and an absolute privilege to be in this forum with these incredible voices of peace and justice and love and spirit. Yes, I want to speak about the regional and national efforts that are in play for just a few minutes. Wearing the hat up here in Dutchess County, it gives us a sense of what is happening between New York City and Albany on a regular basis, and we are in total solidarity with all the efforts happening in the cities across the country. But I also wear the other hat. I'm on the Northwell Health Gun Violence Collaborative Committee, and our voice in this groundbreaking work is to recognize gun violence once and for all as a true public health priority. And Northwell Health has taken a very strong stand in this and is applying resources and expertise from trauma surgeons to nurses all across the spectrum of research and opening up the Gun Violence Prevention Center in Queens just in the past year. But my role in this is to plug in those findings and those efforts into the community-based organizations and the interfaith community. Because as was mentioned earlier, we know that the efforts on the ground is where the greatest change is going to happen. And regardless of all the laws that need to be reformed and all the efforts that have to be made on the government level, we have to change the narrative, the behavior, and the spirit on the ground to be part of the, as you said, Pastor, the multi-pronged solution. So I want to say my heart is a little extra broken this weekend on a couple of levels, from New York, but raised in California, and to see what happened Friday in the reversal of the assault weapons ban makes me cringe for what may be to come on the West Coast. California has been extremely successful. You know, they're down to 42 out of 50 states in terms of what's happening with gun violence statistics. But this is where these reversals become extra important in our efforts. We cannot let this kind of momentum that pushes back on our peace building prevail. So we think of all the cities in California that are taking on this fight in a dramatic way since Friday. And Friday being Gun Violence Prevention Day and Awareness Day, it had extra weight to the heart. Saturday, I'm wearing my orange shirt, and all it simply says is, we can end gun violence. And for the most part, there were a few nods, you know, as I walked and went on my strolls and went into shops. But in one particular shop, the shopkeeper pulled me aside. And she said, I love that shirt. I wish I could wear it. She said, but I'm afraid to be an advocate. I'm afraid to wear a shirt like that because there are too many people around me that I fear would interpret it differently and give me grief or perhaps even harm me. And this is the climate we live in now. But the boldness that we heard in the earlier addresses and the boldness of Clergy for Safe Cities and the GodSquad tells us we will not stop with our messaging. We will not let fear become part of the armaments that stop us from what we do. Now, there's a couple of places we need to plug in, and that is putting resources into the community-based organizations and the interfaith groups, which is what Northwell Health wants to do. After we have enough of the information and resources in play, we have to find ways for our organizations to get the funding. We clearly need resources to take on these types of challenges and fights. So the pastor asked me to do just a little bit of research. It's very nebulous and it's hard to put our fingers on it, but New York City is seizing more guns than ever before. They've already seized more guns this year than any period in the past 25 years, since 1996. And regardless, we do see the surge in shootings. We know that homicides are up by nearly 50% and injuries have doubled during COVID. But this stream of guns, as the Attorney General said, are being smuggled from the South in this iron pipeline along I-95 from the Carolinas up to New York. And as Michael Latetri of the New York PD Gun Violence Suppression Division said, there are multiple guns now being found at scenes, even more than he has ever seen. So most firearms being seized in this asset forfeiture world that we are in are purchased out of state, but they are here. So what do we do about that? We know that there are stockpiles of weapons and that sometimes turns into assets. So we need to figure out what that bottom line figure is and how we might be able to work with our local politicians, with the Attorney General, to funnel some of those assets, those forfeiture funds, into our community-based programs. It's a natural redirection of resources, I believe. Now, the problem is, or one of the challenges is, that the forfeiture funds don't go directly to the city's general funds. They are restricted today, as far as I can tell by the research, to enhance law enforcement efforts, whatever that definition means. Well, if law enforcement efforts mean community-based and interfaith and houses of worship doing this good work, we need to have that conversation. Figures that I have seen that the borough's DAs have control over a lot of the funds that are in the forfeiture program. And the Manhattan DA's account has, I understand, $600 million unspent in the asset forfeitures. So we need to be part of that conversation. We also need to be very clear about our role in preventing gun violence with what may be significant resources in the Biden package. With the infrastructure plan has $5 billion tucked into the Biden plan for violent prevention, specifically for violence prevention. So infrastructure also means safe cities. Who needs new bridges? Who needs the roads paved if our children are dying? So we need to be in the conversation with this infrastructure plan and make sure that we're not forgotten with the package. Now that's on the political and fund side, but I think we also have to change the narrative on the creative side. As people of spirit and creative spirits, we have to recognize that there are other things we can do in terms of redirection. So I have been warmed by some of the efforts to turn arms into arts. I have been warmed to see sculpture like the knotted gun at the United Nations. I have been warmed to see artists like Stephanie Mercedes in DC and in Baltimore, who has a gun buyback partnership with the Baltimore Police Department in Washington, DC. She's a metallurgist who melts down by the ton these armaments and then brings in artists from the cities who work in metallurgy and create beautiful sculptures, reproductions, bells, crosses, Stars of David, crosses. We need to be in that conversation too and talk to our local artists, be part of the beautification and changing the narrative in our communities and allow them to be part of the funding cycle as well. Because as funds come into our communities, hopefully to help us curb gun violence, we should also be funneling these funds into artists and into schools. Because the three pillars in every community are the hospitals, the houses of worship, and our schools. And all three have to be part of the larger gun violence prevention world. So allow me to be your servant at Northwell Health. Allow me to be your voice here in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And as we sort through solutions and information needs to be plugged into the houses of worship and the schools, know that Northwell Health has put that into their strategy. We know it's a long road ahead, but we're on that road, and we're not going to be timid like that poor clerk that I saw Saturday. We're here to stop gun violence. And I would just like to close with a little interfaith prayer. Merciful One, Creator of justice, help us, your servants, find our voice, empower us to change this broken world and to protest and prevent the needless deaths caused by gun violence. Give us power to rise above our fear that nothing can be done, and grant us the conviction to advocate for change. For your dream of love and harmony, make us instruments of your peace. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And you are definitely a great student. You did a great job. I think that I wanted to double check one fact, though. I think that the district attorney, the DA from Manhattan, probably have close to upward to $1 billion. I think it's 600 million that you said. Yeah, someone put in the chat 600 million. That is true. And we have, again, we need to redouble our efforts with the Manhattan DA, we're going to have a new Manhattan district attorney come June or November. And I think that we definitely must push the narrative, the houses of worship, faith leaders, Clergy for Safe Cities, the GodSquad, those faith groups who are doing this work should be included somewhere in that forfeiture money. So thank you so much, John, for that. And yes, we're going to keep you close to us. And we wish you the best up there in Dutchess country as well, up in New York. So thank you again, John. Now we really is pleased to have Greg Jackson with us, who is an advocate and also the National Advocacy Director for Community Justice Action Fund. And he's going to talk about what faith communities should know about the Biden administration plan on gun violence. And so I want to welcome Mr. Greg Jackson. Greg?
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Jackson, the Advocacy Director for Community Justice Action Fund. Just really thankful to be here and be a part of this. I'm also a survivor of gun violence. And so I come to this work not out of ambition or excitement, but out of circumstance. 8 years ago, I was shot walking home in Washington, D.C., and the bullet hit me. It struck 2 arteries. I spent 21 days in the hospital and then 6 months in recovery. And in that time, I learned firsthand how serious this issue is, but also how people are treated, as survivors. I entered the hospital not as a victim, but as a potential perpetrator in the eyes of everyone in the hospital room. I had to navigate through 3 investigations before I could go into surgery when I was literally bleeding to death in the hospital. And so it's just really important that we acknowledge the pain and those people impacted, but also recognize that the way that America has looked at this issue historically has been crime first and health second. And so what we've been focused on at the Community Justice Action Fund is really advocating for addressing gun violence, but doing it in a way that we really acknowledge it as the public health crisis that it is. And we take a health lens and start to look at what can we do to prevent violence from happening, save lives, and not just continue this cycle of mass incarceration and policing that frankly has been failing when we look at the crisis of gun violence. So since then, we've been working directly with members of Congress on the House side, and most recently with the Biden-Harris administration. And so I'm excited to share with you some of the major updates and what's been happening at the federal level. As the Attorney General said earlier, so many challenges are dependent on federal action. And so we've been pushing for those, and I would love to give you a quick overview of what all's happening and what you can do to help. Wonder if I can share my screen here.
Sure, we could give you hosting rights.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I have some slides for you guys.
And while you wait for the hosting rights, once it pops up, you can continue on. I just want to definitely recognize those from the U.S. Virgin Islands, my hometown, who is actively working on gun violence. I see some of you on. So again, thank you all. If you can stay on, we'll have conversations after we go to the second portion, which clergy will be interacting with one another. So thank you again. Go ahead, Greg.
Awesome, no problem. Also wanted to uplift, I think we see how violence is impacting us in all of our neighborhoods and cities, but this country is going through one of the worst trends of gun violence in the last 10 years. We know that every year over 100,000 people are injured or killed, but in this year alone, we've already lost 18,000 lives to gun violence, which is really, really high for this level, this time of the year. And so unfortunately, it's getting worse. What we've also seen is 75% of homicides have been Black or Latinx. And surprising to how the media talks about it, in the Black community, 68% of the homicides are not connected to any other crime. So just looking at this as a crime issue or connected to drugs or gangs or whatnot is really overlooking how far this crisis is impacting. Most incidents are interpersonal conflicts that escalate. So that's a huge thing that we found. And we've also seen police involved shootings at a major rise this year. One big thing that we always acknowledge though and uplift is that not only does this have a toll from a life perspective, it's also crushing our economy. We're losing $280 billion as an American economy due to the crisis of gun violence. And so when we talk about the need for investment in resources, the main justification is not only that it can save lives, but it's also a clear return on investment if we invest in strategies that reduce violence. And so that's kind of been our main narrative as we've advocated for more funding and resources to address this crisis. The president has stepped up in a major way in different areas. The biggest one is his commitment to investing in community-based violence intervention and prevention strategies, as well as hospital-based. And so here are a couple highlights of what has already happened for folks who maybe weren't aware. He committed $5 billion in his American Jobs Plan, which is now being negotiated and worked through Congress. That's also the same as the infrastructure bill, right? That's how he themed it, as the American Jobs Plan. He adjusted the eligibility for 26 existing grant programs across 5 agencies to include violence prevention programs and services as eligible for those grants. And that's about $10 billion. But he made that adjustment on April 8th. He proposed $210 million dedicated to violence prevention and intervention programs in his fiscal year 2022 budget, which is the first time a president has ever invested or committed that type of money. And then in the Department of Treasury and the Department of Education, in their guidance around how to use the COVID relief funds, they recommended states, cities, and counties to prioritize violence prevention and intervention strategies and how they use that funding. So the funding is not purely for hospitals, it's not purely for schools, it's also supposed to help deal with the intersectional crises that are impacting safe schools and a safer transition post-COVID-19. And so he put in that actual guidance that these dollars should also include violence prevention programs. That's really important because that's $1.9 trillion across the country, that some percentage of that should be going to the strategies that we talked about before. He also nominated a huge activist in the movement for ATF director, David Shipman. And I'm sure you guys have seen the hearing so far, but he's someone who is definitely a big proponent of a lot of the strategies that were listed before. He has a major proposal to address ghost guns, made tweaks to the National Firearms Act to include some of the guns that have kind of been under the radar because they've been built, but to include them in the National Firearms Act. He's pushing the Department of Justice to develop model red flag legislation or emergency response protection order legislation to help guide states on how can they help address violence that is a direct correlation to suicide or mental illness. The Department of Justice is launching its first ever annual report on gun trafficking, so we can get a better sense of where firearms are coming from across the country and how they're getting into our neighborhoods. And then lastly, which is a huge one, he updated Medicaid to include violence prevention programs and to include services to survivors of gun violence, which is another really, really major way to get resources into the hands of folks who are being impacted the most. So those are the major actions that his administration has done. Now, I want to also just give you a quick update on the congressional side, specifically on funding, sorry. So on the funding side, we talked about the American Rescue Plan, which is $350 billion that can be moved today out of that $1.9 trillion package. but there are also some congressional opportunities that are moving. So the American Jobs Plan is being negotiated now, but there's $5 billion from Biden's proposal for community violence intervention funding. The federal budget, which I talked about, included $210 million. So we're waiting on Congress to finalize what their budget will be for fiscal year 2022. Through the earmark process, which is new, well, it's returned, members of Congress can request dollars to go directly into their district for community projects. And on the House side, over $21 million that have been requested from Congress for community projects is going directly to community violence intervention and prevention strategies. So that's huge, but that's an opportunity for us to keep building on. And then lastly, there is a draft bill that should be released here in the next 2 weeks from Senator Booker and Representative Horsford and a few others as well, but those are the two leaders to introduce the Break the Cycle of Violence Act, which includes $5.3 billion in new funding authorizations, but also sets up a federal office of violence prevention beyond the Department of Justice's criminal law enforcement focused entity. So an office that is looking at this as a comprehensive strategy and is holding different agencies accountable to addressing violence. So I know this is a lot. I'm sorry if I'm going too long, Pastor, but I wanted to make sure you got to see the federal congressional side as well as what Biden is doing. I will try to skip ahead and get to what we could use your help with, frankly. But there's really three big things. So one, we need to make sure we put pressure on our in-state and city officials to release their COVID-19 funding and put some of those dollars into violence prevention and intervention programs. Certain states have already done it. California has invested $200 million. Illinois has invested $150 million. Atlanta, Georgia, as a city, invested $5 million. Connecticut, $3 million. But we know there are a lot of cities and states that need these resources for violence prevention efforts, but either they are not aware or they're not prioritizing it. And so we need the clergy to put pressure on them to use the dollars how Biden wants these dollars to be spent to help us deal with this crisis of gun violence. The second big thing is, as you're engaging representatives and senators in Congress, there are things that they can do right now. There's a Dear Colleague letter, which is a letter of support in the House and the Senate for the fiscal year 2022 fundings directly for violence prevention. So every member of the House and the Senate should be signing on to that in support before they finalize the budget. Again, the American Jobs Plan is under negotiation. So we need the House and the Senate to protect that $5 billion that Biden proposed to address violence, which is a small drop in the bucket for this big American Jobs Plan. And then lastly, as this new Break the Cycle of Violence Act is introduced, we need members of the House and the Senate to rally around these funds and rally around the creation of this Office of Violence Prevention so that we have the federal support and the federal strategic thinking and policy, frankly, that can support the cities and states that are doing so much work to address this crisis of gun violence. So hopefully this is helpful. I do have a few more slides, but I don't want to take up too much time with everyone. But I want to just thank you all again for all of your commitment and just know that there's some very clear, concrete things that the House and the Senate can be doing. This is not just about background checks. It's not just about ghost guns. There are also real funding opportunities that they can make decisions on right now. So we have to hold their feet to the fire, especially knowing that we have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president for the first time in a long time. So hopefully you all will join us, and hopefully that was useful. Thank you so much, Pastor.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Greg. No, definitely that was useful for sure across the board. But one of the things, and I know that I will double back with the Lieutenant Governor from New York, and also I'm hopefully there's someone from the governor's office in the Virgin Islands who's still on. That money that you're talking about is actually real money, and we have to actually push our governors and our state legislatures to direct those funds according to the directive by President Biden to be able to support community-based organizations. And you're saying that we should be in that conversation to push them, even though I think we should not, but we have to push them in order to have those resources come to our communities. That's what you're saying to us today.
Yes, and frankly, a lot of them are not reading the guidance from the federal government, which is a big problem. So even people with the best intentions don't even know that they can use this money this way if we don't remind them or show them the guidance. So even your biggest supporters, your heavily committed folks to fighting violence may not know that this is something in their toolbox. And the last thing I want to say is we know that unfortunately there's 390 million guns in America. There's only 360 million people. So our communities are already saturated with firearms, and we need to do everything we can to get guns out of the street. But at the same time, we have to focus on the people and how can we prevent folks from even getting to a point of using violence. And if we're not focused on the supply and demand, or the people and the hardware, we're never going to end this crisis. The average lifespan of a gun is 19 years. So the guns are here, unfortunately. So we got to focus on the people too. So I just encourage you to look at it from two sides. How do we address the hardware, and how do we help our people heal and restore and not turn to violence to address conflict?
Yeah, thank you so much. No, thank you so much, Greg. And many people are asking for the slide. I think, Greg, you can, if you could put your email on there so that folks could join you. Everyone, please join Fun Peace. You could hashtag Fun Peace. I also think there's a Twitter account. We'll drop it in the link too as well for Fun Peace. Again, thank you so much, Greg. We also want to remind all of you who are on, especially clergy, what we're doing is that we are highlighting again clergy work, the clergy voice in this whole arena of gun violence. And so we want to make sure that you have the resources that is necessary. We want to give you 2 links today. We want to give you one link, which is our summit guide. That's going to be put in the chat that you can just click on it, save it. So that will be the first thing that we want you to do. And also to, of course, you can follow us on Twitter. We form a Twitter called Clergy For Safe City, Clergy For Safe City, and we'll put that information in there too as well. funpeacenow.com, again, will help you look at what state that you are in, and Fun Peace will help you organize the existing groups already who are working to pull on those funds. So clergy, before we leave, we want to really support and undergird the groups that are doing the work, because again, faith leaders, we don't want to be left out of this conversation. Thank you again. We have with us senior fellow Thomas App and author of the book, A Bold New Plan for Peace in the Streets. And Thomas App is going to come and he's going to speak to us for a few minutes on to stop the spike in urban violence, engage those most at risk. Thomas, good to see you, and welcome to the summit.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with all of you. The title of the book is Bleeding Out, the Devastating Consequences of Urban Violence and a Bold New Plan for Peace in the Streets. And in that book, I lay out the tremendous costs of urban violence, all of the social costs, the medical costs, the law enforcement costs, the increased insurance premiums, the lowered property values. But of course, the most important cost is unquantifiable. It's the human cost. There's no way to put a dollar figure on the suffering of a mother who's lost her son, or to capture the lost potential of a young man who never got the chance to grow up. This is an incredibly urgent issue, and now is the time. Before I go any further, I just have to note that I just want to second everything that my colleague Greg Jackson just told you. This is really a absolutely remarkable moment in this movement, and a real opportunity, I believe, to turn the tide. In many ways, things are looking very bad. We have a historic spike in gun violence all around the country. An average of 30% increase in homicides last year. But at the same time, the scale of resources that are about to be put into this fight are enormous. In my book, I laid out a very bold plan for combating urban gun violence. And I put the price tag on that plan at the biggest plan I could possibly imagine politically, in terms of being politically feasible. And it was just shy of $1 billion. And that plan was endorsed by the Biden campaign on the trail. And that was extremely exciting. But then to see the Biden administration, at the urging of the Fund Peace movement, go even further with this $5 billion potential investment This could be transformative for the field. And so I really urge you, remember, this is just a proposal, as Greg said. So we need your efforts to make sure that this money is in fact authorized and appropriated. And so, what would that money be spent on? It would be spent on community-based, evidence-based approaches to reducing community gun violence, saving lives by stopping violence. And the key thing here to understand, I believe, and what my book says and what the science tells us, is that the way to reduce community gun violence, the gun violence that's happening on the streets of our cities, is to work on it directly, to engage the highest risk people in the highest risk places and work with them directly. Now, it's very important to understand that the way we got here is the ugly legacy of racism in the United States, and that racial persecution led to racial segregation, which led to massive disinvestment in many poor communities. And ultimately, after generations of persecution, that led to higher rates of social dysfunction, including violence. So that's how we got here. But it's important to understand that the violence that is the result of these structural root causes now is perpetuating those structural causes. Violence, exposure to violence is possibly the most important factor that limits a child's life chances. When children are chronically exposed to violence, either as victims or as witnesses, it limits their life chances. It traumatizes them. It inhibits their brain development and inhibits their ability to learn in school. And that ultimately inhibits their ability to get a good job. And so we have to understand that while we push for the broadest possible social justice measures, remedying racial disparities, we have to be mindful of this racial disparity, this massive disparity in victimization, where homicide is the leading cause of death for Black men, but it's the second leading cause of death for Latino men, and the third leading cause of death for white men. And indeed, for Black men under the age of 28, it is the leading cause of death, and it causes more deaths than the 9 other leading causes combined. So we have to address this. And it's important to understand that this problem is not everywhere and not among everyone. One of the huge, I think, challenges in this area is that sometimes we paint this broad brush of community gun violence far too broadly. And I think many of you know that even in our most allegedly dangerous communities, most people are not involved in violence. And in fact, much of those neighborhoods are actually safe. And if you grew up in one of those neighborhoods, you know, because your mother or grandmother would say, go down this street, don't go down that street, hang out with this person, not that person. We have to understand that a small number of people in a small number of places are driving this problem. And we have to engage those people directly. Some of that involves accountability and the role and law enforcement, and some of it involves empathy and prevention and giving people things to say yes to as well as no to. In my book, I talk about the role of faith. I interviewed more than 50 people with direct experience with gun violence, former gang members, former shooters, mothers who lost children. And the role of faith in recovery and rehabilitation and redemption came up again and again. So you have a critical role to play in this work. But I would also say that you can use your moral authority to bring people together in a way that very few other conveners can do. And we need you to bring people together more than ever right now. Right now, people are more polarized than they've ever been, or perhaps have ever been, around these issues. Some people believe that the police are the only solution to this problem. And some people believe that the police are the problem itself and can't be trusted as part of the solution. And the reality is that we need people to come together, cops and communities working together to solve this problem. We know from the science that police have to play a role in this, but we also know that they can't be the only thing, and that we've significantly underfunded the good work that you all are doing in other community-based efforts. So I think it's extremely important to be a convener and an ambassador in this area. And you've done it before. My good friend and colleague, Reverend Jeffrey Brown, with the 10-Point Coalition in Boston and his work since after. Boston was transformed in no small part because of the efforts of African-American clergy. And my friend and colleague, Pastor Michael McBride, and his efforts in Oakland to bring ceasefire to Oakland and around the country and to unite people. So you have an enormously important role to play. And so I just continue to, I urge you to continue your good work and to expand upon it. And I'll stop there for now. I hope that's enough.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Thomas. And Thomas was in Brooklyn with us a few years ago, and great book. We would recommend that anyone who should, if you want to do a good reading, please do get that book. But thank you, and you shared the sentiment that we have been saying. Because we're clergy, we have to be at this place that we walk in between our community and our cops and so law enforcement, because the nature of what we do and the people that we serve always intertwine with these two entities. And but thank you for just making that clearer for us today. And you mentioned Reverend Brown, and before we have Reverend Sharon come on, Reverend Brown is going to come on and actually respond to some of the things that he heard. He is definitely our overall spiritual mentor when it comes to clergy work in gun violence. And there's no one better than to frame all this together for us, Reverend Brown from Boston.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gill. It is so good to see you. I wish I could wear a suit as well as you. I just have a t-shirt on because it's 90 degrees outside in Boston, which is really unusual if you know anything about Boston for it to be this hot. Just so glad to hear the sentiments of my friend and colleague Thomas App. If you have not read the book Bleeding Out, I urge you to do so. The particular parts on faith and the importance of faith are really inspirational and instructive for those of you who are beginning to do this work. And as always, Greg Jackson does a marvelous job in terms of keeping an eye on what's happening in Washington, D.C., and all of the instructions that he has given us, urging us to come together so that we can see in this amazing opportunity that the Biden administration is providing for us, that we can actually finally find funding for the work that many of us have been doing for decades. I'm so glad that I have been able to continue to do the work that I've done in cities across the country. Some of you know about this work, but Gil Monroe's continues to do this work as well in cities across America and of course across the world, in the Caribbean, in the sunny climes of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and in other areas across the Caribbean. He continues to make an impact, and we're so blessed to have him. There are a number of groups like Clergy For Safe Cities that are so desperately needed. You have Michael McBride's group, the Live Free campaign, which has a lot of folks from the West Coast. As a part of his group, you have Reverend Charles Harrison and his national 10-Point Coalition group. You have so many others that are engaged in this work. And the blessing about it is that we are all colleagues and we all support each other. I support Clergy For Safe Cities and the work that they're doing, and I commend all of you who continue to be involved, because you are examples for the nation. We have over 50,000 Baptist churches across the United States. And of course, there are hundreds of thousands of more churches in denominations in inner cities across the nation. We need all of them to be a part of this work. There are churches on every city block in any given city that you can look at across the nation. And we're the only real positive institutions that we have in our communities. Somebody mentioned a couple of them earlier. There are some negative institutions as well in terms of liquor stores and what have you. But you know, for as many of those stores you have churches all around. You have people who are preaching about hope for our communities and for our people. And so I urge you to continue to stick with Clergy for Safe Cities. The amazing leadership of Pastor Gil Monroe's continues to be felt across the nation. This is a growing coalition, and it's so desperately needed. And so thank you, Pastor Monroe, for allowing me to say a few words of encouragement to all of you.
Thank you. Could you tell us about your event coming up? We want to make sure that we
absolutely
all would support that for sure. And of course, you know, Clergy for Safe Cities is 100% behind that event, and we will be attending. So we will definitely put some more information out, but could you just let us know about the event now?
Absolutely, Pastor. On June 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, we will have our Season of Peace convention that we have put together for a few years now. Our last one was in Chicago, and this one will be in cyberspace and Zoom, just like Clergy for Safe Cities. But for those 3 days, we for 2 hours each day from 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we've got a star-studded a group of people coming together. Our first day is really reviewing what the latest cutting edge work is happening around the country in terms of faith groups, getting out into the streets and figuring out anti-violence strategies. So if you're looking for something new, if you're looking to find out what the latest situation is that we're facing, we ask that you come and be a part of that on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we bring together such colleagues as Pastor Troy Martinez in Las Vegas and Charles Harrison in Indianapolis, along with academics as we are pulling them together to talk about this idea of working in the streets with law enforcement in this atmosphere where many people are talking about police reform and even defunding the police. So it's about where do we go from here? And I have law enforcement colleagues, clergy colleagues, to talk about that very important conversation that we need to have moving forward. And the last day is a policy day, much in the same way that Clergy for Safe Cities continues to do this work. And Pastor Gil Monroe will be one of those people who will be carrying the load on that and talking about what's there and what we need to do to ensure that we get funding moving forward so that we can do this work in the right way. And you'll get more information on it. And thank you, Pastor Monroe, for allowing me to plug it.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you so much. I think our team too as well, if you could put that TED Talk with Reverend Brown in the chat too as well, I think it'll be a joy for all of you to listen to him. Amazing experience. Again, he has been leading with us. He was one of the shapers of how we do this work here in the GodSquad many years ago. And so thank you again for your leadership. Thank you. We have a special guest with us who will be our last formal speakers. Then we get into some conversation for clergy so that we can gauge what you have heard and then start to pull some ideas together for the summer. Clergy for Safe Cities, we're here to serve as a not only a triaging organization, but also providing technical assistance, providing the resources, the vast resources that we have around this country, human resources, people who can, again, help you in your local city scale up your work. I just saw that someone said there were 17 violent shootings in St. Croix. I was born on the island of St. Croix. And so for me, it's always a passion for me to really do the work and to help And so I think that even in the Virgin Islands, we do have the structure in place that can really push forward some of the things that you're hearing today. Well, Reverend Sharon Reiser, on June 17, 2015, a horrific tragedy happened, and Sharon learned her dear mother, Miss Ethel Lee Lance, was killed in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Mother AME Episcopal Church, along with 8 other people, which also include 2 cousins and a childhood friend. So more than ever before, gun violence is even impacting members of faith and members of clergy. So Reverend Sharon, thank you so much for coming on today to share with us your experience. And not only that, but you have been advocating and fighting for clergy, the work of clergy in this area. So thank you again for coming on. Good afternoon.
Hello, and thank you for having me today. I have heard everything that I have in my talk. So now it leaves me to wonder, what am I to talk about? Well, I think what I need to talk about is not only do we need to have resources and work on the ground for this gun violence prevention and common sense gun laws, but we actually need to pay attention to the pastoral and spiritual care of the people that have been impacted by gun violence. You know, I believe sometimes we get caught up in what can we do to stop it? And let's be realistic. There are lots of things we could do, but we're never going to stop gun violence. People have been violent towards each other ever since people have been on earth. But I believe the part clergy needs to play in our community is to really be that place of refuge, to be that place where people can come and get pastoral counseling. There are so many people that have been affected by gun violence, not only in their intermediate family, but there is secondary trauma that comes from being in a community, in a family where gun violence has touched their lives. Being a survivor of gun violence, nobody tells you that your life is changed forever. Nobody tells you that because of the trauma you have been through, that maybe you can't work. Maybe you can't afford counseling through mental health agencies or whatever. There is a lot of things a person go through when being involved in a tragedy. And there is a significant difference. And I hate to point that out, because individuals that get killed by gun violence is just as important of people that are killed by a mass shooting. Mass shootings get more media attention. We already know from the media, but there are thousands of mothers and families that have had individual shootings that their lives aren't ever the same. There are thousands and thousands of people dealing with their loved ones that have been crippled for the rest of their lives. Now you're dealing with thousands and thousands of dollars of medical bills. So I believe the church has a duty to not only talk about what we can do to stop gun violence, but what we can offer our parishioners and congregants in our church. How we should be courageous enough to preach about what's happening in our communities, to just be authentic and truthful from the pulpit, to get Junebug and Auntie Jane to say that I'm going to talk to somebody because I know who killed Junebug from around the corner. to let our parishioners know that it's our moral compass to help this epidemic, not by just funneling millions of dollars, but being able to connect to people's soul and giving them a hope that says, if I say something against my son or my nephew, I'm not a snitch, but I'm a follower of Jesus. And because my pastor preaches from the scripture and gives me a word to help me go on, then I could think about calling my senators and the lawmakers. I could be an armchair activist because I could use my telephone as a means of connecting me to this fight. I don't want anybody to ever feel what I and the 9 families in Charleston went through, but not just Charleston, Sandy Hook, Las Vegas, Colorado, Miami. I could go on and on. The devastation to your personal psyche is so damaging. And we already know most people of color do not seek counseling. That's another thing, the church. So there's a lot the church has to do besides trying to figure out how we can get some of this grant money or how we can stop this. We can try to stop it. Since I have joined Moms Demand Action in the Everytown Survivor Network, you know, not all organizations do everything they set out to do. Sometimes we start out with good intentions, and sometimes we get kind of sidetracked. But Moms Demand Action has been one of those advocacy groups that have really pushed me into advocacy. And without them, I would not have some of the national attention I have. And I thank them for that. But you have to do the work for your own community. You can't wait for ceasefire and Moms Demand Action in every town to lead the way. You have to be the one. You're the church in the community. You're the pastor in the community. We have to give our people spiritual hope. We have to allow them to vent the holy rage that they have in them in a safe space. I know I'm preaching because I'm a preacher, but everybody else has said everything else I wanted to say. And I want to point out too, that Judge Benitez, who overturned that 30-year ban on assault weapons in California, compared what he thought an AR-15 to a Swiss Army knife. People, we say we want to be bipartisan. Well, you know what? Dead lives doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. Dead is dead. I am so fortunate to be a part of this Clergy for Safe Cities. I am thankful for the opportunity to be introduced to Pastor Gill and all the people and organizations that he's affiliated with. I pray that we will continue to use what we have, and that means our hearts. When we are authentic from our hearts, people will be willing to join the fight. I have fought for the Charleston Loophole, which is called HR 1446. Charleston Loophole is a bill introduced by the Majority Whip James Clyburn from South Carolina, where I was born. That bill extends the days that a gun dealer has the right to sell you that gun before he gets a background check. It's 3 days now. And after 3 days, if a background check is not completed, that gun dealer has the right to sell the gun. Well, we know since the pandemic and because of the statistics, there have been more background checks not completed because the system is choked up with people running to buy guns. So now the Charleston loophole is important because it expands that. Because you see, maybe if we had the Charleston loophole on June 17th, 2015, hallelujah, my mom and those 8 other people that died in that church might be here today. So I beg you, think of your people. Look at them individually. Let the church be a place of refuge where they can come and feel that somebody cares about them and whatever it is they need. We're not going to wait on the billions of dollars. We're going to help these people today and right now. God bless you, and thank each and every person that came before me with the information that you have, because what you have, you're in your lane. I'm going to be in my lane, and we all can come together and drive down the lane together.
Thank you so much. So powerful, so moving. Thank you, Reverend, for being so open with clergy. I think that sometimes too, how you brought us back to our center today was very important for us. You know, I think it's 2 things. Is that number one, how we see ourselves in this work. And I think that first and foremost, as faith leaders, our role and the work that the Lord has given us is to comfort, is to be there. And I think that secondly, how others see us as well, is that they should see us as someone that they can come to and people that they can trust, and a place to share and lay their burdens down. So I want to thank you for that. I don't know if you can see the chat, but they're surely giving you all of the amens and the hallelujahs that is possible.
Thank you.
But you have just been a gem for us, and I want to thank Alexia for connecting us.
Well, I want to say I have to push my book too.
Go right ahead. For such a time as this.
For such a time as this, Hope and Forgiveness After the Charleston Massacre. It tells the story of this little Geechee girl born to an unwed teenage mother that comes through a tragedy and lands into activism. Read the story, because you know what? It tells you that any one of us, no matter where we come from or what we've done, we can do important work, and our voices are heard and our voices are powerful. So get the book, Amazon, everywhere books are sold, and thank you for allowing me to plug the book.
Always, and thank you so much. And we'll put that link in there to your website too as well. Thank you. Thank you again. I'm going to, before we open up to some clergy, I'm going to ask Bishop Mark Beckman, who is the Bishop Liaison for Bishop Against Gun Violence, the Episcopal Church, to come in and kind of close out this session before we get into some conversations around this room. Bishop, how are you? And good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor Monrose. It's an honor to be with you. This is the third time Pastor Monrose and I have had several conversations. I represent Bishops United Against Gun Violence in the Episcopal Church. There are 100 bishops from across the country who are committed to reducing gun violence. In my retirement, which is so-called, I am now the Bishop Liaison. So I've been developing relationships with others who are deeply committed to this work. And Reverend Reiser, we shared the podium at National Cathedral before the March of Our Lives several years ago. When I was bishop in Newark, New Jersey, had Jeff Brown come up and speak to an assembled group, including then Mayor Cory Booker, after a horrible gangland shooting in Newark, a level of violence that we had never seen before, the city had never seen before. So lots of relationships there. And I'm also a part of the gun violence prevention table and part of the messaging group of that. And it's a real challenge to coordinate all the messages. And one thing that I have learned in the course of our work together in this messaging group, so much of the work, at least on a national level, is about policy. And the work that Clergy for Safe Cities does is about values. And it seems to me that if we're going to have the impact that we need to have, we need to be talking about values, gospel-based values. As Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. Blessed are the peacemakers. That is us. That is us. Policy is important, but often it takes over. And as someone has said in our messaging group, the gun violence prevention movement is largely white dominated, but is not white led. You are leaders. We are leaders on the ground with relationships. As Reverend Reiser said, we have the relationships with people who are experiencing this every day. Greg Jackson spoke to you earlier. He has been part of our messaging group every now and then. And he came up with a slogan that I would like to offer to all of you. And it has some connection to the Hippocratic Oath, which all doctors take before they are sworn in as medical doctors. And the oath is, do no harm. A variation of that, which I think that we can adopt and live into, is keep people free from harm. To adopt Jesus's message, Jesus's witness, to enable people to be free from harm. It takes a lot of work, but we have the history, we have the relationships, and we have the commitment to move forward. So it's an honor to be among all of you and just celebrate the work of Clergy for Safe Cities and look forward to ongoing partnerships and collaborations for reducing this epidemic of gun violence. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Bishop, for that. And I think at this point in time, I also want to lift up, all of our mothers who have lost loved ones to gun violence. We want to announce that not only do we have Clergy for Safe Cities, but we also have Mothers for Safe Cities. And thank you, Natasha Christopher, for putting that bug and pushing for that to happen. And so thank you so much, Bishop. I want to bring in a couple of the clergy. You could stay on pin here, Bishop. I know that, let me just check really quickly. I want to be respectful to those who we have on with us. Baltimore, Maryland, Memphis, Tennessee, Dallas, I think this is Dallas, Texas, and Indiana. I know that we had quite a few. I'm not sure if someone from the team we do still have people on from the Virgin Islands. We have some clergy on. If you can pin, Ray Martinez, who is the head of the LEPC, I think I'm getting it right. Memory slip, he's on with us from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Good to see him. Who else do we have on in terms of other states? I'm checking. All right, do we have any other clergy who was on from a different state besides New York? We got New Jersey, Bishop, Pastor Jeffrey Brown, are you still on? If we can bring on,
I'm still on, Bishop. I'm still on.
All right, could we pin Bishop too as well? Do I have Natasha on if she can come on? Do we have any other pastors who join us from another state? Just want to recognize you.
North Carolina is on.
All right, who we have from North Carolina? We can bring in Pastor Zach Martin from New York. Pastor Zach.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, we're just going to pin a few people on to have a conversation. Okay, Pastor Zach is on. Pastor Straker. Is that someone from California on here? I am not too sure. Could you bring back on John for me? The last time I asked Carrie to speak, she was nervous. How are you feeling today, Carrie?
I'm good. I'm just dealing with, a little drama in the city. So.
Well, good to see you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you could pin Carrie on for us. She could join us for a little bit to have a conversation. Give a good cross section of individuals. All right. So I wanted to and I don't know if Reverend Sharon is still on, right? So if she's on, you can bring her on too as well. But so there's a couple of things in my mind. We started off the day by hearing from elected officials in terms of where they sit and what they see, and that's fine for us. And I think at the end, the last two speakers kind of bring it back around in terms of the fact that this is a spiritual work that we need to get done. And I think that Clergy for Safe Cities, what we intend to do is that we intend to take clergy members who are doing work in their local cities who might feel that you're all alone, like that this is just you alone doing your work. Clergy for Safe Cities, the idea is that we want to bring together all of the resources that we have, different resources, and to let you know that you are not alone, that there are faith communities really working not only to end gun violence, as Reverend Sharon said, but also to be that support and that comfort. And when you talk about people losing their lives, I think there's a special blessing in our work when we can support those victims of gun violence, but also self-support. And I think that we wanted to talk about that. So Zach, as you, Pastor Martin, as you had listened to all of this, what are some of your takeaways from this summit this afternoon?
I am. I'm just grateful you make space for this stuff, because you're reminded in being in these spaces that you're not alone and that you're not crazy. That you're putting yourself on the front line to have these conversations, to be a part of Cure Violence, to be the spiritual, support in your community, and to have just other folks in other cities and other spots in the country. It's just an encouragement. So I think for me, again, it's always participation in. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So for me as an organizer and an activist and a pastor, it's always trying to find who is already doing the Cure Violence work in the community. So for me personally, it's Youth SOS and GMAC, two organizations working in the neighborhoods I'm working in, trying to find ways to bring interns in from those organizations to help build on the work, to be a presence in those communities, having residents from the communities that we're serving. We focus particularly on public housing residents in our community, and having the youth and residents from those communities be the first responders, be those who are on the front lines by supporting them and providing with resources. So for me, it's again, being encouraged about what's happening and then continuing to do the collaborating work of finding who is in the community already doing the work so we can do the work together. So
yeah. No, thank you for that. And I think that from someone who probably would be non-clergy or working with clergy, Carrie, in terms of everything that you heard and all the notes that you took today, what are some of your takeaways from this National Summit on Gun Violence?
There's a lot of resources, and so once again, we aren't alone. And so we have a group chat here. I'm in Albany, New York, and there has been increase in gun violence. So this weekend was our first march against gun violence of all of the orgs coming together. And so with these resources, then I can distribute them to all of the different organizations and funding sources, because that is really important.
Yeah, that definitely. You know, good work needs good resources. And I don't think that we want to leave here thinking that we're not saying that you need the resources to do the work. Thank you so much for that. So Reverend Sharon and Natasha, as being Natasha, you heard Reverend Sharon speak. She came through me through I think it was Moms in Action or Every Town.
Every town interfaith. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Every Town Interfaith Network. Did she speak to you? You need to unmute yourself. And for all the others.
I know Reverend Reiser, and she spoke to me, right, because I'm also a survivor, right? And for me, yes, like we were here and talk about funding, and she brought it right back home where it needed to be headed. Like survivors, yeah, we are, survivors are in pain. They're in pain. They're suffering with mental illness, trauma, and she just brought everything right back, because I do not do this work because of money, because no amount of money in the world will give me back my son. Yes, we need funding to do the work, to make sure that our young people, we can have resources for them. But at the end of the day, money will never give me back my son. So I do support everything that the Reverend has said. And I've worked with you, Pastor Gill,
yes,
for 9 years. And I can actually say that you're one of the person who has never used my pain for your own purpose. So that's why I'm still with you. And we just need the rest of clergy to, do what you're doing. Get from behind their pulpit and put their boots on the ground. Take to the streets, talk to these young people, talk to these families. There will never be an end to gun violence, but we can save lives.
That's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. So John, you have 600 million reasons to continue plugging through with all of this. God is a God of justice and a God of mercy. And when you see, as Dr. King said, that a budget is a moral document. And when you see that $600 million could be used to help Black and brown individuals, for you, what does that say to you, and how do you feel about that? John?
Yes, Pastor, you're right. Our budget is a reflection of our values. And nobody likes to be in the money discussions. But if we want to identify what we're up against, we realize that money is driving what the Attorney General said, which is an economy that puts these guns in our neighborhoods and is killing us. So we can't separate the violent economy from the peace-loving advocacy work that we all stand for. And Martin Luther King knew he had to take on the Vietnam War because that was a major economical distraction from the social justice that needed to be done on the ground. So we don't want to be lost in policy and budget conversations, but we want to remind our policymakers that we are aware. We know what you're doing, we know where the money's going, and we know what the consequences are. So it's two gears, right? Mm-hmm. The gear that we're on every day is loving and serving and protecting our kids and being brothers and sisters with one another. The other gear is the big fix on the policy side, which is where the dollars are being driven. And so the Attorney General is right. Part of the big fix will be our capacity to really take on the source as well. And I don't know how we budget ourselves in terms of what time we put into each.
Yeah.
I would like to put 99% of my time into loving and being in service to people right in front of me. But I also recognize that part of me has to keep an eye on bigger elephant that is stomping on our communities in this gun economy.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Well said. I think that we're very well rounded and grounded in terms of our approach to this. We're just joined by Reverend Ramel, a call from Baltimore, Maryland. So we didn't hear from you today, so we'll allow you to chime in at this point in time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm a priest in Baltimore, and our area is called the Diocese of Maryland that holds a portion of Baltimore. And I grew up in my own home diocese, and I'm grateful to add something to this discussion. I think when we talk about gun violence, and I'm grateful for all the information, it just seems like this is far from a simplistic solution. It is a very complex thing. One word I know all too well is called pluralism. So I use that word a lot because when it comes to solving gun violence, it takes more than just looking at race and class and poverty and so many things or systemic issues. It is truly a plurality of so many adverse issues that happens around gun violence, to the point where it may seem that a one-off situation really comes about almost decades of so much adversarial ills. And so when I think about me and as an individual or many of our colleagues or pastors throughout Baltimore, we're really at an uphill battle trying to get a lot of those things worked out. And so I've learned to embrace, to really try to give that very complex narrative, to realize that it takes so much of us, it takes a lot of resources, it takes so many different things. But I try to make sure that let's not look at that from a one-dimensional thing. This unfortunate ill truly has a complexity, and we need to appreciate that. But don't be scared by that, but learn to embrace that and be patient with yourself to really try to get all of that worked out, and know that you're going to need all the amount of partners to really try to eradicate that as much as possible. I think sometimes, especially when it comes to media, we really try to find the real simple solution. We're kind of a microwave society. And I think it's important that we really do our best to just digest this whole decade of systems that have been flawed between housing and all those other things. It really has played a role. So I'm really preaching to the choir, but I think it's important that we don't run to the solution so quickly. We just have to absorb all of the details of all those ills and be willing for folks who are still trying to get that to be absorbed to sit in there, because people live this thing out. And I'm just putting words to it, but people are living these ills out. And that's the unfortunate piece about gun violence.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I see, hey, TK, TK is actually Buddhist, so if we can pin him on, he said no guns, then no gun violence. It's simple if the nation can practice it. That, again, 390 million guns. The guns are here, and so we have to deal with that situation. So I'm going to go to Pastor Zach, and then
sorry. Can I say? I don't know how I say. Oh, sorry. Well, I'm still.
One second, TK. We're going to pin you, TK, so we can see you.
Oh, sorry. Oh, this is from the yesterday. I'm sorry.
No problem. We're trying to get back everyone pinned, so just give me a minute here. So Reverend Reiser, if you would have some last words, as you heard all of the things I've been saying. Of course, there needs to be a call for funding, but they also need a call for compassion, love, justice, and mercy, according to the prophet Micah. If you can give us some last words, you could do so now, Reverend Sharon.
Oh, wow. Put that on me. Last words.
No. I mean, we have a few, but yes.
Well, look. So, everybody that has presented and have talked have said things that are true. There is just so much work to do. And I just hope with all of the organizations we have that somehow there could be a book or a directory with all of this organization, contact information, that we can look and see what we have, so then we don't repeat and use resources trying to do the same thing because we have 9 groups in one community trying to do the same thing. It's just a lot of work to do, but we thank God for the people we have that are willing to do this hard work, because it is.
Right.
Next thing I will say too, as activists and clergy, we have to take care of ourselves. There has to be self-care, because this work is hard, it's intense, it's emotional, and because we try to be there for everybody else, we have to remind ourselves that we have to be there for ourselves in order to be there for somebody else.
That is true. Thank you for that. Pastor Zach, you wanted to say something before I go to Pastor Straker?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that again, the connection between the activism and the resources, particularly in New York, and I'm not sure where all the other cities are at, but we're in a massive overhaul of our city council, and there's a lot of side hustles that are happening right now. People are trying to move into new positions and new opportunities. Borough presidents, city council. I'd encourage you, along with making sure you know where that race is at, follow their track record. Follow their track record, because they're going to make some asks in their new roles that they've not been accountable for in their old roles, right? So there are city council people in my district who are making promises in their new role right now that they have not followed through on in their local district. And we need to hold them accountable to make sure that, hey, you're being put in front of people claiming that you care about Black bodies, claiming that you care about community resources, claiming that you care about cure violence, but you've not done the work in your own community, and now you want us to vote in your new opportunity. We need to be in front of people saying, follow their track record, because we can't have people having more power and not following through on the promises that they've promised in their own communities.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that is definitely the case. Let me
So
go to
can I speak or can I not speak? Which way? This is TK.
Yeah, TK. Yeah, what you were saying now about no guns and no, go ahead. I'll give you a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. No, all I'm saying is because I'm from Japan anyway, so there's no, I mean, the 2 or 3 people will be killed by a year in Japan because nobody has a gun. So that's why I keep simply saying is no guns, no killing, of course. I mean, that's a very simple, but yet New York, we know too, right? I mean, New York, we try to control the gun. So that's why no gun, not much of the incident of the guns, the violence, but all the guns come to the other place. So which means, I mean, simply if there's no guns, there's no, I mean, it's just a simple, but yet it's practiced some country. So why not United States can do? Because I think U.S. too much trust the the weapons, basically, because the part of the Buddhism, we start talking about, the Buddha said people start fighting. You know why? Because they start carrying the weapons. I mean,
I think.
I mean, it's a simple, but at the same time, this is a kind of the efforts that, I mean, it seems like, this country should do. I mean, because it's the same as a nuclear weapons. I'm dealing with a lot of nuclear weapons issue, but then why people cannot get rid of a nuclear weapon? Because they attach to the nuclear weapons. They don't want to give up because that's the weapons to control other people. But it's because of that, that's danger. I mean, everything is the same idea of attachment of the weapons for me. I mean, so if you wanted to carry the weapons, so which means you will bring the, welcome the violence. I mean, well, carrying the weapon is welcoming the violence, basically. So how can you stop it without, so which means because of that, we have to also see that it means though it will continue to have the people who will be suffered by the violence, like Pastor said. I mean, it's a work that we should do, but yet this is a work we shouldn't be doing it. If there's no guns, then we don't have to do this kind of things too. So from that sense, that this itself is a very compassionate act of trying not to carry any guns or anything like those. I mean, that's all I'm saying, okay? So, but anyway, it's not against anything that people say. In a way, it's complicated, but it's not that complicated in one way, but it's very difficult to do. I mean, that's all. That's simple, but yet difficult to do, actually. So how can we make it possibly to do? Then we can solve the problem too in one way. I mean, that's all I'm wanted to share with you today. So thank you so much. But I appreciate very much for all the the opinions and then the ideas and the understanding. It was wonderful to hear.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. Thank you, Kiki, and Eo's been a great supporter, and thank you for that idea. In that tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, you get rid of the guns, like you said in Japan. Just 2 or 3 deaths a year, and in America, the more guns you have, just the more deaths that you have. So we are up against a giant in our community. I would love to be doing something else, than doing this, but it touches us in so many different places. The hurt, the pain, the carnage. That we have to really push to try to make it as much safer and better for people as much as possible. Why? Because if we don't do it, then at any point in time, any one of us could be victim to the violence, as we see people around us dying and lives are being changed and torn. It propels us as people of faith that when we pray, it propels you to move and to progress forward so that we can have safe cities, and so, but thank you for that. Pastor Straker. And then I'm going to go to Pastor Mike to close out.
Well, thank you, Pastor Monrose, and all of the organizers of this event. I have to agree with Brother TK. This is very simple. It's very simple. However, the problem that we have in America is that we are a violent nation. We are a nation that is created and built on violence. And so it's very difficult to bear fruit when the root is very different from the fruit we actually desire. And so when we realize this, we begin to understand that as a result, we shouldn't have to do this work, but we have to get involved. And it's going to take all of us that are clergy to be the moral conscience and the moral compass for America. I was overwhelmed with what our Attorney General was stating, but God has called us for such a time as this, Reverend Reiser, that we have to speak truth to power. We have to be that moral voice, because violence anywhere is a threat to lives everywhere. And so if this is happening in New York City, if this is happening in Chicago, wherever it's happening, we have to come together and speak up, because someone is profiting off of the lives that are being taken in our community. And the love of money, as the Bible says, is very true. It is the root of all kinds of evil. As Pastor Martin was stating, all of these people that are coming into offices and these kinds of things, we have to hold them accountable. But the work has to be done, whether they give us funding or not. We have a powerful work, and it's a spiritual work. And so we wrestle not really against flesh and blood, but we must learn how to tear down those principalities and powers and rulers of darkness. There's a spirit of violence, and the only ones that have the power to do it are those that are authorized by the kingdom of God. So I encourage all of our clergy to come together. We got to fight the good fight. We got to pray with our feet. We got to hold our legislators accountable, and we got to fight these demons. We may not eradicate violence forever. We will always have the conflict, but we can save lives in the work that we do. So God bless you all, and thank you so much for all of your dedicated efforts.
Yeah, thank you so much for those words. We're very appreciative of all of you. I want to, before we do some closing remarks by Pastor Mike, I want to, again, put in the chat just ways to get in touch with us so you can stay connected. Thank you again all for coming on. We really had 2 great hours. I want to thank you all from the bottom of our heart, from our team, to have you come on and spend these precious moments with us. Collecting and mobilizing clergy around this work, it takes a lot of touches, right? A lot of texts, WhatsApp, voicemails, all of the things that you can do, because clergy, you're so busy with all of the things that you have to do. But I want to thank you. At one point, we had at least 150 on. So I know that the message is resonating, and those of you watching as well on YouTube. So we're going to put our contact information on. You can go back and you can replay this if you miss it as well. I would say you could share it again with your contacts or people that you would like to make sure that see of all the information that we have, use us as a resource. Clergy for Safe Cities, again, is here to pull resources together with clergy members who are in a city by themselves, thinking that they're alone. And Pastor Zach said it all. Thank God that I know that I'm not crazy. It's not only you alone going through this, and you're not the only one feeling this way and feeling that, hey, we can do more, and why is the help not coming to us? Where are the others? So all of the others are here. We're here from all across the country and from the Virgin Islands, from the Caribbean, because we think that this work is important to us. And so again, we want to thank you. So we're going to put that contact information in. Please also to put your contact information in. We're going to download our chat so that we can have all of your contact information. And again, thank you. So Pastor Mike, we're going to pass the mic to Pastor Mike. You can unpin everybody else. And Pastor Mike, you have the great task of coming in and giving us a closing on our marching orders.
Well, it's a blessing, praise the Lord, everyone, on this Minister Monday when we're all licking our wounds from a high time on Sunday to gather and have a conversation about one could argue the most important issue in many of our communities, the continued loss of life that many of us, I think, would acknowledge is needless. It can be prevented. It can be reduced significantly. And so certainly to Pastor Gill and to all of us who are part of Clergy for Safe Cities, we have a role. The scripture says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We must see ourselves as peacemakers, but also healers. I'm reminded of the passage of scripture in the book of Acts, for all of you who know your Bible, at least the Christian New Testament, if you will, when Paul was in that city prophesying and they had the young girl who was being literally exploited by the city leaders. And Paul had to literally free that young girl from the exploitation of those who should know better. And in his act of liberation, it ended up putting Paul and Silas in jail. Well, I want to suggest to you all that we must be those kinds of pastors and leaders in our communities. We must be the agents of liberation and healing. We must be folks who are bringing the system to bear around their continued disinvestment. So if you're looking for something concrete to do, I think they're going to let me share my screen. I wanted to invite you all to join us this summer in what we're calling 1,000 Congregations for a Summer of Peace. We have in this moment an opportunity to literally take advantage of the billions of dollars that the Biden administration has put in the availability of all of our communities through federal resources, federal grants, and ARP money, American Rescue Plan dollars. In cities across the country, there are literal dollars from the COVID-19 relief package that the president has said could be used to fund gun violence prevention strategies that are community generated and community centered. If you're aware of this, maybe just lift your hand on the chat if you're aware that these resources are available. Yeah, now what's happening is
Brother Greg did a good presentation on that for us today.
Greg Jackson already did that?
Yeah.
Good. All right. So part of what we're asking folks to think about then in this moment is, what does it look like for us as a collective over the summer to come together and ensure that we are helping to mobilize our communities around a summer of peace, right? A summer of peace that gives us the opportunity to ensure that our communities have what we need, so we are not going through the summer totally in the dark, totally without resources. We want to unite, as we say, the streets and the sanctuary. We want to unite the pulpit and the pews and the pavement, all right? And they're going to be every week between now and the end of the summer, an opportunity to ensure that we as faith congregations can show up and provide concrete activities in the communities across the country, free barbecues, free sports opportunities, sports leagues, things like a weekend barbecue in the park, a block party, a flag football league, a basketball league, an opportunity for us to get 1,000 churches to commit to a summer of peace. And we want to launch this on Father's Day. If you're looking for something concrete to do, we want to kind of plug all of us into something. So in each city, we can be bringing our faith leaders and our clergy together to be in partnership with the street outreach workers and the violence intervention prevention specialists that are on the ground. And so if you're interested to help us, as we say, monitor, mentor, and minister throughout the summer in a very structured way in your city, we want 1,000 churches or congregations to help us pull this off. And so I share this as an opportunity for us to actually do a follow-up step. I know sometimes the paralysis of the issue, the problem can seem so magnanimous that we feel like, we have meetings, our little efforts that we do don't feel adequate. But imagine if we all acted with some unity, with some coordination. We will put some resources in each city to help us pay for the meat. We're not going to, pay for your whole organization. Somebody say amen. But we can help you buy some barbecue meat if you need it. So all you vegetarians, we can buy you some Beyond Meat and some Impossible Meat. Somebody say amen. I see you, Pastor Straker. I know you one of them new vegetarian preachers. Somebody say amen. And we can go out here and we can do all we can this summer to show up. How many of you know that the ministry of presence is one of the most powerful tools we have? And if we don't show up, I want you all to hear me on this. And this may be somewhat controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are hearing that police departments are already recruiting clergy to stand with them to increase the size of police departments in their city in response to the gun violence that is happening. We don't need more cops in Black communities. We need the resources that come from police budgets to fund the strategies that we know heal people's lives, save people's lives. And the lesson from the 1994 crime bill is that clergy and politicians stood together in response to the community's ask for more jobs, more mental health services. They asked for more police. And the only thing that we didn't get no jobs, we didn't get no mental health support, and we got a lot of cops and a lot of prisons. Wouldn't it be a shame that in the most violent, in the biggest increase of violence we've seen since the 90s, if clergy were used again to be the moral cover for more cops and more jails versus more investment in mental health support and issues related to violence prevention that we know work. And so we want to encourage the Clergy for Safe Cities network. All of you that are here, I know Pastor Gill, we were talking about this just last week because we're starting to hear this in many cities across the country. We need to invest in our communities, and we need pastors all across the country to be the political megaphone for that from our communities. And I think if we can work together to do that, we will see healing in our communities. We won't see more violence. I believe that our communities can be healed. Do I have witnesses here today?
Oh yeah.
I believe that I believe our communities can be healed. I do not believe we are criminally inherent. We're more violent than everybody else. The only thing that can bring our community to heal is more violence and cops. I don't believe that. The devil is a lie. We are God's children. Our children out here come from the wombs of grandmothers who prayed in churches every day and every night. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
These young people just need to be brought back into remembrance of who they are and whose they are. And if we as pastors and churches can't do that, we ought to lock up our doors and never come back, because that means our faith is too small. I believe we can bring peace to the community without more incarceration, and I pray that all of us can do that work together. Healing will save our neighborhoods, not more police, not more cops. COVID-19 has unleashed a level of trauma in the Black community that is unprecedented. And so we must match that with a level of healing that is unprecedented. Let's do a summer of peace together. Let's keep meeting in these summits together. Let's meet in the streets, in the neighborhoods, and let's love our people back into life. God bless you. God be with you. We're here to support you, and we got each other's back. God bless everybody.
Thank you so much, Pastor Mike, and God bless you as well. All right. Thank you. Pastor Mike is always on the money. Listen, he again support us through all that we have done, and so we thank him. So now there is the 99 of you. Now is the time that those of you who are in different cities,